She told me she had never been with a man. She said it the way you'd say it if you meant it, quietly, with her eyes down, in a church community gathering in Cebu, 3 weeks after I landed in the Philippines with everything I had ever saved. $350,000 and 62 years of life. And I believed her. I believed every version of her that she showed me for 18 months, because the version she showed me was exactly what a lonely 62-year-old man from Columbus, Ohio, wanted to see. Her name was Joy. She was 26 years old, and the day I installed that camera in my own home, the $60,000 house I built in her name, because the law doesn't allow foreigners to own land, was the day I stopped believing in anything she had ever told me. If you're watching this because you've met a woman who describes herself as traditional, innocent, untouched by the modern world, and you're already starting to believe her, stay right here. Subscribe, because I'm going to show you exactly how I discovered the truth about mine, and I want you to understand it before you've already lost what I lost. The version of Joy she introduced me to first was the most carefully constructed thing I have ever encountered. I spent my career in logistics, 30 years of coordinating systems, tracking variables, identifying when something in a supply chain was presenting as reliable, but was actually a point of failure. I was good at it. I was well paid for it. And Joy played me so completely that not one single alarm went off for almost 8 months. That tells you something about how sophisticated the performance was. I arrived in the Philippines in my 61st year. I am going to be honest with you about why, because I think the honesty matters. I was lonely. Not in a catastrophic way, not someone who couldn't function, just that particular loneliness that accumulates quietly in a man who lives alone in a Midwestern city, who goes to work and comes home, and whose world has contracted to a circle that barely includes anyone who notices him. I had been reading about expat life in Southeast Asia for a couple of years. The Philippines specifically, English-speaking, Catholic majority, low cost of living, warm climate, a culture that, from everything I read, still valued older men and maintained traditional family structures that had mostly disappeared back home. I want to be fair. Most of what I read about the Philippines was accurate. The country is beautiful. The people in general are genuinely warm. The food is good. The cost of living is real. The problem was not the Philippines. The problem was the specific 26-year-old woman I encountered 3 weeks after I landed. Joy was introduced to me at a church community gathering in Cebu by the woman who ran the guest house where I was staying. Modest in her dress, quiet in her manner, and she presented herself from the very first conversation as someone who was fundamentally unlike the modern world. She spoke about faith without sounding performative. She talked about her family in the province with specific tenderness, her mother's cooking, her younger siblings, the rice fields her parents worked. She mentioned quietly, in a way that was clearly meant to sound accidental, that she had never had a boyfriend, that she had been waiting for a man she could trust completely, that she had prayed for years for someone faithful and kind. I was 61 years old, and I had been alone for a long time. She might as well have been reading from a script tailored specifically to me. Within 6 weeks, we were together. Within 3 months, I was planning a future that included her. Within 5 months, I had started the process of building a home in her province, on land that had to be legally in her name, because that is the law for foreigners in the Philippines. A detail I knew intellectually and dismissed emotionally because I trusted her, because I believed the version of her I had been shown. I believed she was exactly what she said she was, a traditional, devout, inexperienced woman who had been waiting her entire life for a man exactly like me. The cracks appeared slowly, and I paved over every one of them as they appeared. The first was a phone. About 4 months into our relationship, I noticed Joy had started carrying a second handset, a cheap Android that she kept face down or tucked away. When I asked casually, she said it was a work phone, a loan from a coworker because her main phone was being repaired. I accepted this without question. A week later, the explanation had shifted slightly. Now it was a family phone, kept so her siblings could reach her when her main phone was busy. I noticed the inconsistency. I did not pursue it. The second crack was the language. She knew I didn't speak Tagalog. We communicated in English, which she spoke well, and she was always careful to conduct extended Tagalog conversations out of my earshot. She was sensitive about this in a way she framed as protecting me. She didn't want me to feel excluded, she said, and she always translated afterward. The translations I received were always benign. I had no way to verify them. The third crack was a man from the village. He appeared occasionally without a fixed explanation. The first time he was a distant cousin. The second time, when I brought up the cousin specifically, Joy looked briefly uncertain before she said he was actually a neighbor who helped with local repairs. The third time I didn't ask. I watched instead. Meanwhile, the financial emergencies had been running for months. Her mother's medical situation, a collapsed wall in the province house, a younger sibling's school fees, a sick carabao, the family's water buffalo, explained to me in careful detail because the detail made it believable. Small amounts transferred quickly through GCash or Western Union, each one carrying a specific story and a specific number that felt reasonable in isolation. I had transferred at that point roughly $40,000. I knew this because I sat down one afternoon and added it up, something I should have done earlier but hadn't, because adding it up would have forced a confrontation I was avoiding. $40,000 in emergency transfers in 8 months, and we were living in a house that had cost me $60,000 more. Somewhere between the $17,000 I sent for the roof and the $800 for the school uniforms, some part of me had already known that the pattern was not accidental. I just wasn't ready yet to find out exactly what it was. I want to tell you exactly why I installed the camera and exactly what I saw, because I think the specifics matter in a way that vague warnings don't. I had gone into town to pick up materials, a genuine errand, but for 2 weeks before that morning, I had been sitting with a quiet, growing certainty that I was missing something I needed to see. The arithmetic of the transfers had already changed my thinking. The second phone, the shifted explanations for the man from the village, the Tagalog conversations that always moved out of range. Individually, each of those was explainable. Together, they formed the shape of something I didn't want to name out loud. I ordered the camera online. Small, wireless, designed to blend into a wall fixture. I installed it in the main room of the house one Tuesday morning, told Joy I needed to be in town for most of the day, and left. I drove 20 minutes to a coffee shop in the nearest town. I ordered a coffee. I opened the camera feed on my phone. 45 minutes later, the man from the village was in my house. I am going to be specific about only what matters. Within the time I was watching, the conversation between them in Tagalog, which I had been quietly studying for months without advertising that fact, made clear 2 things. First, that their relationship was not that of a cousin or a neighbor or any other version of what I had been told. Second, that I was a subject of that conversation. The word for foreigner in the local context came up multiple times. The amounts that had moved from my account came up. My character was assessed in terms that were pragmatic and brief. I sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours, not because I needed more information. I had enough within the first 15 minutes. I sat because I had to process the physical reality of what I was now living inside. I had built a house. I had planted banana trees in the yard. I had sat at Mass every Sunday morning beside this woman. I had, in my most honest private moments, loved her. And every piece of that, every meal, every prayer, every morning when she handed me coffee before I was fully awake, had been a transaction in a ledger I was never supposed to see. I drove back when I was ready. I went in through the back while Joy was in another part of the house. I took one bag, clothes, passport, what was in my wallet. I left without saying anything because there was nothing to say that was equal to what I had seen, and I was 62 years old, and I was done pretending. I want to talk to you directly about the word innocent, because that word was very specifically part of what Joy sold me, and it deserves to be addressed honestly. The presentation of innocence, not just physical inexperience, but a whole performance of traditional values, deep faith, and untouched goodness, is a very precise tool. It is calibrated for a specific kind of man. A Western man of a certain age who has grown tired of a world that feels cynical and transactional, who is longing for something that feels clean and genuine and uncomplicated. The offer of innocence, of a woman who has been waiting, unspoiled, for someone exactly like you, is designed to meet that longing precisely. It is not random. When it is used as a manipulation, it is intentional and it is surgical. The truth I found on that camera had nothing to do with any technical definition. What I found was that the fundamental premise of what she had sold me, the idea of a woman with no other life, no other loyalties, no other financial interests beyond building something real with me, was entirely false. The performance of innocence had been a business decision, a successful one that cost me $350,000. Here is what I want you to take from this if you take anything at all. The presentation of innocence should not lower your critical thinking. It should raise it. Because innocence is the one quality that is impossible to verify quickly, and it is precisely the quality that disarms the kind of man who is most likely to be targeted. When someone leads with how pure and traditional and untouched they are, that is not a reason to trust faster. It is a reason to watch more carefully and move more slowly. Protect your assets legally before anything else happens emotionally. You cannot own land in the Philippines as a foreigner. This is the law. It does not care about your relationship or your intentions or how long you've known each other. If property is in someone else's name, it belongs to them. Full stop. Consult a Philippine property lawyer before you spend $1 on real estate. I cannot say that clearly enough. Track your money from day one. Every transfer, every emergency, every small amount. Total it monthly and look at the number honestly. If the number is climbing on a pattern that doesn't have a natural endpoint, that is the answer to a question you haven't asked yet. Learn the language before you arrive and keep that fact to yourself. The ability to understand what is being said around you is not an optional luxury. It is basic situational awareness. I learned this too late and too slowly, and I am paying for that every single day. And go in with your eyes open rather than your chest open. Your heart can follow later, built slowly on real time and real evidence. But if your heart goes first and your eyes stay shut, you will end up exactly where I am. A 62-year-old man in a $10 room in Manila with a ceiling fan and a social security check and 350,000 reasons to talk to you about what I should have done differently. Subscribe and stay with me. I've got more to tell you, and all of it is true.